So the corrosion of good and the corrosion of success, in my opinion, in athletics and ability isn't a physical corrosion. Rarely ever. It's a social corrosion that distracts or takes away from their ability to work as hard as they did, which is potentially just an energy time frame deal. Outside of injury, I have not really seen too many examples where a 10 becomes a 6 that doesn't have influence from other twos and threes. Right?
Welcome to the Captains and Coaches Podcast. We explore the art and the science of leadership through the lens of athletics and beyond. I'm your host, Tex McQuilkin, and today I'm sitting down with Derek Woodske, a veteran coach whose philosophy on performance goes far deeper than sets and reps. Derek has guided athletes across multiple sports and levels, from collegiate track and field to professional environments, and he's here to share some hard-earned wisdom about the psychology of competition. We're diving into the brutal reality of delayed gratification in sports and why not everyone is meant to be a 10, and how the greatest teams are built on players who embrace being a glue guy. This isn't your typical sports talk. It's about the mental game that separates good from great, and why sometimes the most important players are the ones you never hear about. Now, let's throw it off to Derek to help us raise the game. Ready, and great.
Action. Sitting down at SummerStrong 18 with Derek Woodske, longtime friend. I remember talking goals here way back when, and you gave a phenomenal presentation to the team just on your thought process for goals. And that's kind of what I want to explore now, since, you gave that presentation, 4 or 5 years ago?
I think it was 4 years ago. It might even have been the pre-COVID or the post-COVID. It was in before or after. So it was either going to be, 20 or 19 or 21. I can't remember. I'd actually have to go back and look.
Yeah.
But I feel like the entire, talking about goal setting timelines and everything, regardless of what topic, it's the same thing I think about with COVID. It's like, how can time become so manipulatable that, we forget that 2-year period? It's almost like, that was like 3 years ago, right? No, that was 5 years ago. And it's all psychological state. And I think about that a lot, especially when we think about where we're going to go with this conversation in terms of how do you manipulate time psychologically, positively or negatively, right? And that's kind of it's a conundrum that we have as coaches and athletes, I think. Sometimes it feels like it takes way too long, right? So you start to get into a weird headspace. Sometimes it happens too quickly and you miss your opportunity for greatness because you weren't prepared, right? So yeah, I think when I think about just a simple introduction question like, hey, how you doing? It's like, oh, by the way, here's a philosophical answer. But yeah, I think we're probably going to cover that topic a little bit today.
Yeah, and then what I felt was the right topic for you was delayed gratification.
Right.
In a sense that I just finished up lacrosse season, and we had seniors. We lost our first game, and the whole season was over.
Right.
So it's arm wrestling these kids to care for so long. Finally, we get to the season. It's like, oh, I care.
Yeah.
And then one thing went wrong, and now we're out. And so the season, of course, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Mhm.
Everything they said they feared would happen, unfortunately happened,
Yeah.
despite of the coach's arm wrestle trying to get them to believe. And then I'm sure you experienced it that last game. Any athletes that you had, here come the tears and realizing my career is over.
Yeah, or our retirement at the very
Mhm.
end, right? Like it's all different stages of that same evolution. It doesn't matter how successful an athlete's been from high school through college to pros, retirement is their last loss. And it's kind of a weird thing to think. So if that is the ultimate end goal, it doesn't matter if you're Peyton Manning, who finishes, I believe, his career as a Super Bowl champion, he still has to take a loss against time, right? And it's like, well, now let's work back all the way to like the micro level, the simple week to week, month to month. It's like, you put in your 4 months, 5 months, 12 months for a loss, or maybe you're in a program in high school where you develop for 2 years knowing that you're getting better each season, or a 3-year season, that by the time you're a senior, that you guys are going to be champions. Well, someone's going to be a champion, right? And we hope that everything works out in our favor, but there's no guarantees. And when we kind of think about that from the perspective of a coach, it's like, how quickly can you rewind that tape so that you can get them back into a growth mindset for the next season,
Hmm.
especially after that loss? Because it's not about just like cleaning the wounds of defeat. It's like, how do I get them healed, like psychologically, emotionally, physically, because some it's sports, you get dinged up, but how can you get them reset on all those different levels so that they're like, okay, so this is my new zero. So my new zero is the second best team in conference state nation, right? And from my perspective, because we had a couple of athletes, I had an athlete in college that barely made it into NCAA's, and I say barely just because they ended up being very good, right? So that first go around, they barely made it into the NCAA championship, and then still felt really defeated when they were mid pack because they put in the same amount of work, right? It's not like they didn't crush and push hard. But I remember having a very real conversation with him and being like, listen, I know you had higher expectation. I know that others won. I know that you performed very well, but your very well was kind of right here in the middle.
Hmm.
You have to remind yourself as soon as possible, right? Without being a sociopath, right? And just having no concern about who you were. Be like, because like that's not always great too. There's a time and place, but be like, your new zero, your new starting point is a mid pack NCAA national contender. Until you got to that meet and stepped on that field or got out of those blocks, you can't claim that. Like you were just another athlete trying to get to a place.
Hmm.
So that is a positive for sure. And so in second place, I think it's an easier thing than say someone that gets knocked out of a tourney like in fourth, fifth, eighth, or 10th, because then you're having this weird conversation about, well, where were we really? Because they get into that mindset, well, if we had been matched up against this team who we beat before, we would have been, no, it doesn't work that way,
Hmm.
right? It's more, you have to be a little more big picture than that. But at the very least, you're now top tier, right? And that I think has to be reminded in the beginning. You have to remind them of how good they actually are. Like losing sucks for all of us, but a good coach, in my opinion, and I haven't always had good coaches. I've had some great coaches and I've had some bad coaches. The really great coaches always were able, they always had the ability to put in perspective where you were when it was done, good or bad. And it was rarely a tough pill to swallow.
Hmm.
You get that conversation done as close to the competition as possible.
Yeah.
Like if you got to give them a sour pill, give them a sour pill when they're sour. Don't, right? Like don't wait for the sick horse to get better before you give him his medicine.
Hmm.
Be like, cut it. Like this sucked. We did this bad. This is what we got to fix. Yada, yada, yada. Get that all out of the way. But as soon as that's done, now the healing starts, and the healing is how to, like, okay, our new net zero is second best in the state. Well, we only got one rung on the ladder we have to kind of reach for the next go around.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Sticking with the sour when I mean instinct is naturally try to lift them up from the head down, the sense that they're in,
Yeah.
but it's still grabbing their attention and let's be present. This feeling sucks.
This feeling sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember I had an athlete at Adams State. She went on to be quite a good discus thrower. Yeah. She threw 180 feet as a D2 discus thrower. Eventually made it to NCAAs again. Had an okay NCAAs, but had a really good season as a whole. But a year previous, like she should have opened indoors with automatic qualifier for NCAAs in the weight, and just really didn't do well, like in any aspect of it. Terrible opener, terrible competition mindset, terrible performance, which is crazy because she ended up being quite good. But I remember like knowing her psychology, and she was not a yeller, screamer, intense girl. Like she was very subdued, very introverted. Um, like almost you would think she was meek, but she wasn't.
Hmm.
But it was just it's the energy she gave off. Some of it was cultural, right? Being Native American and just how she grew up. It was just, it's almost like this quiet stoicism was her war face, right? And I didn't understand that in the beginning, but that's her culture. And it's funny. So what I as soon as I just had this inkling of suspicion, right, early on with her, and as soon as that meet went bad, I mean, we didn't even move out of the throwing area. Like we, like it was in front of everyone. I just walked up to her quietly, and I'm like, "Do you journal?" And she's like, "Yeah, I have a journal." And I'm like, "Not tomorrow, not an hour from now. You need to sit down right now and write down every aspect of this that makes you feel horrible." I'm like, "You need to take all of this energy you got trapped in you." And because I know she's not a yeller and screamer, a wall puncher, I'm like, "You need to get this out." I'm
Mhm.
like, "I don't care what you do with it after. I don't care if it's you fold it up and read it before every meet for the rest of your life. But you have to acknowledge what happened, own it, and get it out."
Mhm.
Right. And for her, I remember looking over like maybe 10, 15 minutes later, and she had like a page. And I
Yeah.
was like, oh, there was a lot there. That was a lot.
So in that sense that I mean that takes high EQ by you. Did you get a sense that there was something trapped in there, or just in your mind, if I was in that position, I would be feeling this, so
I
maybe it's
think
there?
a combination of both. I think like personal experience of having been an athlete for so long definitely played in there. But, I think also just being around her for enough in the off season that year. And she was a new athlete to me at that time. And I remember just thinking to myself, okay, she's put 150 pounds on her back squat this year. She's really athletic, good looking athlete. I'm like, it's there, right? It's all within her, but for whatever reason, she's not extroverted in any sense of the word. Like there was not a single aspect of that personality makeup that presented ever. Quiet talker, uh, no talker, right? Like, so in my mind, I was just like, if I reprimand her, I had it maybe it was experience from my coaching past, like coaches I had, but for whatever reason, I knew that if I, like the old saying, like tear her butt in front of everybody and be like old school coach, I knew that I would lose her from that point forward, probably for the rest of our time together. I just knew it was going to be like the absolute failure for us. So I just put the onus on her, and I knew she had really high grades. I knew she
Mhm.
was academically really clever, and I just kind of took a shot in the dark. But at the same time, just had a feeling that the solution for her was not going to be the same solution I used later that afternoon with my giant alpha meatheads that had the same kind of experience.
Mhm.
Those guys just got the bro talk locker room, like, guys, like, what the heck did you do? Like, how can you, like, where are you at? Like, aggressive, 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 maybe occasional, profanity. And they're like, yeah, coach, next time we'll get them. Right. And to them, that's all that mattered. Like fight, fight, fight. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did bad because I did bad. No clue.
Taking that perspective and then reflect on just the preseason and all the time spent up to lead to meets,
Yeah.
to be able to have the hard conversation. Think back to when you just started with this group, and even the first time with the female athlete. Were you talking about goals? Were you talking about meets that were down the road?
So when I first took that program on, um, it's kind of the same mindset I've always had. Like, I'll be very honest with people and I'll be like, not everybody's meant to be a national champion. And I think as soon as you learn that is not a negative,
Hmm.
right? Some people are meant to play the sport at a high level. Some people are meant to play it at an Olympic level. And some people are meant to be the greatest of all time. All along that road, each one is extremely beneficial and positive to not only that individual, but that individual's give back to society, right? Like if I can take a zero and make them a five, and knowing full well that they're going to be tens, right?
Hmm.
Tell me one example where fives are less of a positive add to society than a zero. It doesn't exist, right? And for me, I had a lot of the most important people in my lives were not always tens, like athletically, right?
Mhm.
So, like, I think of my teammates, like some of the most influential teammates I ever had were maybe sixes, fives, threes, right? And so when I look at that type of thinking and I start looking at like planning for my athletes, I don't tell them they're a three. Like everybody's pushing for tens, right? But I will start to look at how they're developing. And then based on how they're developing, I'll start to focus on tangible goals that are going to be more in line with them getting from two to three to four to five. Because if, especially in team sports, you can't have all tens,
Nope.
right? And you may have all tens over time that go to different places. That's pro sports, right? So let's say Florida State has, let's just hypothetically on some team has three tens and a bunch of fives, right? Well, those three tens aren't going to go to the Patriots. They're going to go to three other teams potentially where they're all tens, right? That's kind of how the whole world works. But those super high achievers in team sport will not have the opportunity for success unless all your fives, six, and sevens show up with the same mindset as well, right?
Mhm.
Because they're the support staff, right? It's like Zach Brown sings, but somebody has to play the drums, right? So it's just how the world works. And there's been a lot of times where I know full well that I'm a solid five at something. And I know that my solid five is going to allow my eights, nines, and tens to be successful. And
Mhm.
I love that position. They're support staff, right? So I start to look at that early on with my athletes. And when I do so, I start to help them choose goals. Like, for example, I may have an athlete that their goal is going to be to get through to conference, right? Your goal is to get through to conference and be a team point supplier for the national championship potential team or conference championship team. That's your role. You need to do X, Y, and Z. These are your like metrics that you have to meet. If you can do that, you're going to win as a whole through your ability to provide as a team,
Mhm.
right? Track is great for that. So you take like, hey, bro, we need you to get seventh place at conference or we're not going to win conference. And they're like, really? Yeah, that, yeah, really. They're like, oh, okay, coach. And then maybe they get a sixth or a fifth. They just had a 10 score out of their five,
Mhm.
right? So now they went from being like, this is what we expect of you. We need this from you to being like, you stepped up, bro. Like you stepped up big time. And so I'll work with that level. And then my high achievers, you might get one every couple of years, you might get one once a year if you have a great program. They carry burden, they carry heavy load.
Time out. Let's take 1 minute to talk training. I'm presenting to you the Old Bull program. This is the program that I am writing for myself, former collegiate athlete, former guinea pig of all sorts of training programs. I've seen and I've done it all, and my body is feeling it. In order to recover my joints, still continue to build muscle, and look the part as a coach, leading the way, I'm offering you Old Bull programming. This is what I'm following. It is fun. I'm having a great time bringing in former athletes and colleagues into the party. Meet us out there for a 7-day free trial. Click the links in the show notes to give the Old Bull program a run. Now, back to the show. Ready, and break. Which I want to introduce. I don't know if you've heard of Pat Riley's Disease of Me.
Disease, yes. That's been a long time since I thought about it.
Yeah, big fan of Pat Riley all around.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm hearing is you're communicating expectations of their role,
Yeah.
where they are, you're level set on their skill set, but there's still room to grow for each person.
100%.
And then those tens, they don't see that they're better than anybody else.
Right.
It's they have a responsibility as this 10 to execute. And then the five's got a responsibility to execute to get the seventh to continue to help the team overall.
100%. And Pat Riley, it's a funny this Pat Riley. So my coach bought Pat Riley's book back in the day, took it to him to get signed, and Pat Riley was signing it. My coach was a four-time Olympian, right? And Pat Riley started to sign it, and it was like good luck. And then he stopped and looked at him. You won't need it. That's a
Frame
powerful
that
coach.
book, get it up,
Yes.
dude.
Isn't that amazing?
That's awesome.
Yeah.
How about that?
How about that? Yeah. So talk about a guy that, Pat Riley knew. He knew what he knew, right? Yeah. Good luck. You won't need it.
Man.
Yeah. This is kind of wild, but yeah, that was always one of my favorite stories that Judd used to tell. But Judd was the king of that, right? Like he was the king of taking twos to six and sixes to 10 his whole career.
Mhm.
And and in my opinion, that's why he's probably been the most successful track and field coach in the US in a lot of regards,
Mhm.
because he had that ability to pull out, and that's really it. Like I was never a 10. I had aspects of a 10. I went to Olympic trials. I was a national champion. But in my sport, a 10 is Ryan Krauser,
Mhm.
like world record holder, Olympic gold medalist, right? So that if that's your standard of 10, yeah, you want to push for that. Joe Kovacs is pushing for that every day. But at the end of the day, especially in some of those individual worlds, there's 110. In
Mhm.
team sports, there's 110, right? Not the same, NFL, only one Super Bowl team a year, all those cliches. But you're pushing for that, but you might operate very well 7 through 9. And when you understand that, as long as you never let your athletes reset to fours and fives in their ability chart, you're moving in the right direction,
Yeah.
you
And
know?
you've been in a lot of different sports, a lot of different teams. Has there ever been a sense that you got when that 10 started getting treated like a 10?
Yeah.
And then now he's not held to the same expectations, behaviors, rules
Yeah.
as everyone else.
I used to see that a little bit like in my brief stint in the NFL. And then when I was working private sector, I often, so, and this is kind of like inside mid 2000s chit chat type of stuff. But we had some guys get big contracts in Cleveland, and some of the veteran guys that had gotten big contracts or whatever, but stayed the course, they would all kind of refer to it as hey, he got paid, probably won't play this year. Right. And so what they noticed within the team, and this wasn't like an administrative thing, this was players talking to players about it. They're like, man, he got the money. I hope he shows up this year, because he got treated. He finally got recognized. I shouldn't even say treated, because he's probably earned it at some point, right? Where he kept progressing, 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 gets to that level where now he's being recognized for his ability through finance, and they shut down, right? And that or behavioral issues show up, right? Because for whatever reason, the money gives them false sense of freedom and hope of life, like, because maybe they had nothing, right? Or maybe like any human being, you put enough money in front of them, they're just like, do the rules still apply? Right? Do I have to do this to get this? And so when that starts to happen, all you can hope in some cases, because they're adults, that you put in the groundwork, or the people that can reach out to them and pull them
Mhm.
back. Um, at the collegiate level and the high school level, a lot of times it's obviously not a financial thing that makes them kind of start to believe their own hype, but it's community, school members, other people at the from other teams being like, oh, that's the guy, wait until so and so shows up, like the shoot scenario from Vision
Yeah.
Quest, right? Like, the idea that, oh man, he's the guy, and maybe he is, or she is, right? And maybe they will remain undefeated like Arnold Schwarzenegger and have that work ethic, this want to, like, being number one was more important than anything else that comes after it. But if you start to see the corrosion occur, it's typically starts social,
Mhm.
right? So the corrosion of good and the corrosion of success, in my opinion, in athletics and ability, isn't a physical corrosion. Rarely ever. It's a social corrosion that distracts or takes away from their ability to work as hard as they did, which is potentially just an energy time frame deal, right? They don't have the time anymore to put in the work because they're socially response are supposed to be
Cool,
doing
whatever.
A,
Yeah.
Y, and Z, and uh, and that's usually the breakdown. Outside of injury, I have not really seen too many examples where a 10 becomes a 6 that doesn't have influence from other twos and threes,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Extracurricular activities.
yeah, right. And they don't often even always know that they're pulling the legs off out of his chair. They
Mm-mm.
just want to be around it, right? They want to be around people doing great stuff. It's like a lot of false leadership is simply the byproduct of individual success, right? So someone really does well at something and they have no intention of being a leader, right? So they were just an individual climbing the ladder and they're kicking butt and doing great things. But because they're the best, others will be like, oh, that's our leader.
So this is going to lead to the next set of questions in respect to teammates picking team captain. Often
Right.
it's he's the best player.
Right.
So then they feel he's going to be team captain. So
Right.
it's helping establishing expectations. How I was able to combat that is a job, like a job resume.
Yeah.
Here's the expectations, and simple enough, similar to any entry level 16-year-old job.
Yeah.
Where they can, okay, do I want that? I'd rather just be the cool kid. Fine, then it's not you.
Right. Yeah.
So
And it's funny because it's really interesting you say that, because being a 10 in one area doesn't mean you're a 10 in all areas, right? And there are great players that can come out, say a defensive player that's not a captain or a defensive player that's not leading the show, but without that player, you're not winning the Stanley Cup. Like we know he's gonna beat everyone's butt. He's gonna get in fights. He's gonna prevent scores. He's gonna be the guy that crawls off the ice every night. And we know that in the locker room, everybody follows that dude. The NHL is great for that, right? You'll have this one crusty old dude who just smashes, and you're like, he's our guy. He's our leader, but he's not captain. Doesn't matter. He doesn't want to be captain because he knows his personality is not captain material.
Mm-mm.
He doesn't want the burden of all the other stuff that goes with that position. He's going to lead through example, and people may never give him, oh, well, even Gretzky kind of did it all, but it's like no one will maybe ever remember him as a Gretzky. He doesn't care. So on paper, they'll be like, oh yeah, dude was a solid 8 his whole career, like superstar. He went to all-star games, solid 8. Not a 10? No, there's something missing. Well, what was it? I don't know. Maybe there was nothing missing. Maybe his position in life was best to be without some of that intangible fluff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not the best guy on the team, best guy for the team.
For the team. Yeah. And I think that gets overlooked a lot. Like maybe it's age for me now a little bit, but I've I've always wanted to win, especially playing an individual sport. I love to win, but in team sports, I love being a solid 7. I love being a guy.
Glue guy.
Yeah, glue guys, right? Like I loved it. I loved being a part of everything. And I knew at times where in team sports, if I tried to become too much in one area, which was kind of my personality at times, I've always felt a little unstable, right? Like I didn't feel stable, hyper focused in team sports. I wanted to be the guy that was like just in it all the time. And I knew that I would have to give up some of, like I would have to kind of almost mute certain things and not focus on like kind of sharpening that edge because I wouldn't get to do some of this other stuff. And that's a weird psychological state too. Like how do you become a glue guy and maybe not get all the attention? You know, the old joke about centers in the NFL, right? They'd be like, hey, do you recognize me? No. And he's like bends over and he's like, how about now? And he's like, oh, right. And it's like, there's some truth to that. Like without that guy, the game does not exist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's similar positions in lacrosse. It's what I love. And then I just so happen to play that position. But then there's responsibilities. We had to drive team vans.
Yes.
We got to talk to the referees before the game. We got to do the coin toss. So when the best players listening to his music and doing his shadow
Right.
boxing,
Right.
it's like, all right, well, we'll get everything going
Yep.
and let you be you. You be the dude. And I'll
Yep.
just make sure everybody's ready to be ready.
Be ready. When I worked with Zach, so when I was on the road with Zach Brown for that year, he talked about that a lot. Now he is literally the tip of a spear in an industry, but it's just like
the
sports,
parallels. Yeah.
the parallels.
So
So he had this giant staff, including his band, and the band was all famous, but they would also tell you flat out, I'm famous for the 150 feet around the stage, so don't get it confused, right? They were pretty funny dudes. But Zach's superstar, right? It is what it is. And he knew and talked about it in depth. He goes, this entire thing is a giant machine of parts. And he goes, and each one of these individuals is an expert in their area, but you would never know it. Like when he introduced me to his world, like there were so many people And he
Mhm.
goes, they're all absolute experts at what they do, but any one of them maybe not so noticeable, right? Or they, would go a whole year, and at the end of the year, I'd finally meet someone. I'm like, what do you do? They'd explain it. I'm like, oh, this doesn't exist without you. How have I never met you, right? And Zach was very cognizant of that. And he really treated his people well because of it, because he's like, hey, I can't go stand on the X at all if these 35 other people aren't doing stuff when I'm asleep,
Mhm.
right? Yeah, and
And
that's
again, now going back to sports, we see that the disease of me
yeah,
in Miami and Pat Riley,
right.
Butler became that guy, demanded a trade, and then yeah, so he's able to see it because he's seen it so long
Yes,
at such a high level.
high level, right? And it's kind of interesting. And I think some of these people that get pulled down by the social, or maybe can't stay in the world, or they want more for themselves at the fault of another, that they're like, you know what, you got to trade me out of Cleveland. I need to get traded to
Where,
X, Y, and Z.
yeah.
It doesn't matter because they've been to a Super Bowl recently, or they have a good shot at going to a Super Bowl. And then magically, the team they left gets better and performs better, and the team they go to performs worse. It happens a lot,
Yeah.
and I think it really comes back to glue players, because their resentment. They're just like, hey man, I built this building for you and you left it.
Hmm.
And it's like, no one waiting for you right now has the foundation of you, right? And that's the part people don't realize. Teams are built on foundation. So if you have your pinnacle player represents a certain skill set, that is all based on not only good coaching and good skill development and all those good things, but it's also based on the foundational understanding of his teammates or her teammates that have all these goals and all these jobs to do, that if they do them perfect, that superstar gets way up here to do what they do, which is called score goals. Super simple mindset, right? Um, and if those foundational blocks of those players are missing, it's really hard for those pinnacle players to do what they do.
Hmm.
Like Gretzky's not a Gretzky without his Oilers or his LA Kings or whoever he was with over those years doing all their jobs. There's a reason why, like a Wayne Gretzky had to play with Messier for a while, right? Like this first chance he got to be with him again, it was like, oh, we got the team back together.
Hmm.
Not the Oilers, the team. So that represents individuals that had in Messier's a superstar. Or Mark Messier. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
God, I'm going way back. Make sure my brain still works. Right. But they had their roles were so important to each other that Gretzky is not Gretzky without those guys.
Hmm.
Like he'd always be a superstar. But he's not Gretzky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Timeout. Text here at Train Heroic headquarters, meeting with the team to talk about the coaching experience that I'm able to provide for my athletes. So if you're a coach and want to put your program out there on an app that athletes actually enjoy using, Train Heroics for you. I've been using it since 2014, delivering literally over tens of thousands of workouts to athletes, and the Train Heroic allows me to provide the unique coaching experience that I want to. Uploading video, providing coaching feedback, directions, and building a community. That's why I love Train Heroic. And if you want to take your athletes where they can't take themselves, that they want to go, head to trainheroic.com/captains and check out how you can deliver programming to them. And now back to the show. Ready, and rip.
I think there's some truth to that. You can do the same analogy probably with Michael Jordan.
And many other greats
Yeah.
in respect to many other games. And then, so now think about how would you aim to communicate that to 16 to 18-year-old with limited life experience?
Limited life experience. I think sometimes you have to give them super big picture examples. And you might even have to bring in people that can resonate with them, right? Especially in the modern world that we're in, and show them that these individuals were dependent on these scenarios to hold true. And then you have to make them see how freaking important it is for a support role on a team. And you're not just a defensive player. Like that is a really cool and really important job, right?
Mhm.
Like, and you have to make that as much of a priority as a coach, because if not, you're going to fail. And as cool as possible for them to understand that it's like, oh yeah, like is a silly hockey analogy, but some guys are really good at fighting. They're not going to score goals, but man, don't ever hurt the guy that scores the goals, because this guy's going to come out of his cage and wreak havoc. You have to make that okay, whatever that equivalency is in sport, right? Like, you have to make people understand that your role may be a protector, your role may be a leader, your role may be somebody that keeps everyone together off the field. Like, there are guys out there that were sixes on the field, that were tens in the locker room, and maybe hundreds when no coaches were around and people were about to make some real bad decisions. Right? So those, you have to cultivate that culture, right? It's okay to be the guy that is like grabbing your superstar and throwing him in the back of the truck at 1 a.m. on a Friday night because he's had too much to drink or he's going to get in trouble. And everyone knows that that's our quote unquote sheepdog of our team. Like, that is, he's going to protect the herd and make sure the flock gets home that night. Without that player, good luck.
There's no season.
There's no season, right? And we see that a lot. Again, social degrades performance, right?
Yeah. And then oftentimes how that 10 treats the sheepdog, he lets him go sometimes if it's not treated well.
Yes.
So
100%.
That's, yeah.
It can go both ways. And I remember being on a team where I was coaching, and it was a pro team where the quarterback at the end of every season bought something of extreme value for his entire offensive line, right? It could be Rolexes, could be cars, it could be something, but it's like, listen, I'm not this without this. And these individuals are not going to be who they are without their support staff below them, right? And it all builds on itself.
Yeah. No matter how the season turned out, here's a sign of respect.
Sign of respect. Yeah, like everything's a tribe. Every team is a gang. And on some level, in proper use of the word or not, every team that works well together and is successful, they have to start thinking of themselves as gangsters, because they're out there to achieve and win and overcome, and they need to bond hard with what it is that they are, and they have to own who they are. Like, and then when the losses potentially could happen in a season, right? It doesn't matter, because they're hardened. They're like, they have each other, and it's like the best image I ever saw, and I wish I could find it again, it showed, what would you rather be? Would you rather be on this team or this team? And it showed a picture, and it was like cartoonish, but it was cool. And it showed a row of men standing facing the same direction, like Spartans, right? All facing forward. And then in the other photo, it showed the same guys, and they were in a circle. All their shoulders were touching, and their backs were almost all touching, right? And it said, who would you rather be with? And I was like, oh, Spartans, that looks cool. And then I read what it was breaking down the information, and it said, in tough times, you want to be in that circle, because in that line, yeah, you're all facing the same direction. You're all maybe going to battle, going to war, but you know who's to your right and left, and you probably know who they are. But what the other photo represented was people that were in the crap, like they were getting hammered. Life was breaking them down, and their response wasn't to spread and run or to get apart from each other. They circled up. Every single human was touching another human. And if they tried to back out or they tried to get away, they'd back into somebody else. So there was no way for any one of them to leave the other. Like, you could either go forward into adversity or you would push back into each other for support, but there was no other option.
Yeah.
Right. And I remember seeing that image, and that one, it stuck with me, and I've never been, yes, who knows where I saw it, but it just resonated. Right. I'm like, you can go forward, but no one's going back.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And I feel that's a strong visual representation to close out on.
Perfect.
And you're continuing to do amazing things, educate, pontificate, speak
Yeah.
while you're having a cup of coffee in the morning.
Yep.
So where can people go to continue to learn from you?
Yep, they can still follow me on Instagram just under my name. I'm not as active as I used to be, but I'm still active. Like getting into law enforcement just takes time, right?
Mhm.
Which is cool. They can still go to my website, derekwoodske.com. There's workouts that they can download. There's an ebook on there that they can download. So there's still stuff, and I still try to be active on that. It just comes out a little more periodic.
When you're inspired, feeling it,
Inspired. Yeah,
flow state. Well,
that's right.
dude, I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me.
You
It's
just being
awesome.
you.
Yeah, this is cool.
Thank you for tuning in. See you next time. See you.